welcome to episode 3 of our data driven podcast. My name is Rose. I'm a data engineer and I love working with intrinsic data systems. The more complex the data system, then the more challenging it is. It's like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Um, Together with my co-host, Rana, uh, we, we have open conversation about how data can help with making decisions. So, a little bit about Rana. Rana is a leader in a product. She consults with high growth startups to help them drive 10 times product growth. She has driven over $60 million in impact using product led growth principles. Feel free to schedule time with her if you are interested in building a growth engine at your company. Also, if you are interested in keeping up with our podcast, we do have a sign up link, which I will post in the comments after, uh, so that you will get notified when we do have new podcasts coming out. Today, we will be talking with Amirah Raveneau-Bey about what to do to save revenue from falling off the cliff. Amirah is a go-to market leader with 25 years track record in driving revenue, scaling teams, and building companies to successful IPOs. She is a strategic advisor and entrepreneur dedicated in boosting leaders and businesses, unlocking revenue potential, and cultivating exceptional leaders by unraveling the secret of leadership. She is a proud alum at Citibank, Trulia, Zillow, NerdWallet, and Opendoor. Feel free to sign up for her newsletter, which I will also post in the comment after this. Without further ado, I am going to pass the stage to Rana and Amirah. Thank you for joining us, Amirah.
Hi, thank you so much, Rose. I appreciate your introduction. Welcome, Amirah, to our data driven podcast. It's so nice to see
Hello.
you.
Nice to see you, Rana. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a Friday afternoon, and I'm looking forward to my son's game in the afternoon. And just want to say a word about veterans. Today is a Veterans Day. Take a moment to just recognize uh, all their impact
Contributions.
on us as a community. Um, Before we get started, is there anything you'd like to share, Amirah, before we dive into the questions?
Thanks, Rana. I echo what you just said. I want to take a special moment to honor our veterans. This is their day, and their contribution to our country. Also, I want to just I think the thing I really want to say is for those that are entrepreneurs or really focused on their career, they're probably thinking about work on a Friday. So they might be thinking about some of the things that we're talking about. But the biggest important thing I'd like to just say is making sure people listen to other people that have gone through the trials and tribulations so that you don't have to do it. Learn from others. That's why we read books. That's why we watch TV. That's why we do a lot of things. So take it in, take notes, and learn from others' mistakes for sure.
And reach out if you have questions. Um,
Absolutely.
you can learn from our mistakes. How's that?
And
Um,
successes. And
yes, yes,
successes.
yes, yes. Success comes through learnings only. So tell us. I have a burning question about like what are the signals that one should be paying attention to, um, before revenue kind of goes off the cliff, and that does happen from time to time.
Yeah, great. Well, when you think about revenue falling off the cliff, it means that revenue you thought was going to be at one level is at like totally went somewhere else and you didn't see it coming. And generally speaking, when you have great data, you're going to see top line information, but it's going to tell you what happened after it happened. And so when you think about revenue, it's really important that you make sure that you not only have top line revenue numbers, but you've got your KPIs that you're looking at as a dashboard. And that should also include some of the activities that you're doing to generate revenue. Those leading indicators are going to clearly tell you exactly what's happening before it happens. So, I think about a time where, I was working at one of our earlier companies. I think it was back in my time we were leading a huge team at Trulia, and we were noticing that we were not getting as many pickup rates. We were not getting as many clients. We were not connecting with them. And we knew that there was something wrong. It didn't hit the revenue much later, but we knew immediately earlier on that what we were seeing was that there was an activity, that's something we typically do, that wasn't getting the same traction. What that does, it just allows us to kind of diagnose. Then you can figure out what happened. Is it a competitor? Is it something happening with the industry, which was something that happened with us, right? Something that you cannot control, but at least it gives you a narrative. And then you're able to say, okay, well, what should we be doing? And actually, it led us to do a different activity to get to the same result. But without the dashboard, you would have never known until maybe about 2 to 3 weeks later.
Gotcha. So let's talk about leading indicators, right? It's a really good point. Sometimes revenue doesn't get impacted right away, but you see sort of signals happening way ahead of time. Talk about the leading indicators in a setup like Trulia, which is, I'm assuming, a B2B product at that point. It's a B2B to B2C, right?
Yeah, B2B to B2C. And I would say, some of this will go from Trulia, and it'll go for all of the other companies I've worked with, where it's really important to make sure that you understand the leading indicators would be making sure that all of the outbound activity metrics that you're currently doing or your team is doing, that you're capturing and you're seeing that, right? Making sure you understand not just the deals you've done, but the deals that have happened in the past. Understanding your industry is really, really important. You need to understand that in Q4, you may not be making a ton of business and know the why. I'm thinking about a client that I'm consulting right now, and they're in a really interesting cycle, right? They actually boom the first quarter of the year and they get really quiet on the third quarter of the year. Well, a new leader comes in and they're trying to figure out, why isn't revenue booming in Q3? It's not booming because if you look back, Q1 was your boom. Q2, there's a slight decline, and then it really dips in 3, and then it ramps up. You have to understand what is happening in your industry, what activities do you normally do, where are conversations taking place, and then you also understand, when are people using your product. That's extremely important, right? Because that tells you the cycle of your business.
Right, right. Absolutely. And I was at a startup where it was a B2B product, and our revenue retention was very high.
Mm,
It was in the 90s and 90th percentile, which was amazing, right? But when you dug down into the KPIs of actual usage, it told a completely different story.
mm,
And I was trying to make sure that we paid attention to that data because it can be an early indicator of churn,
that's right.
especially when you have a B2B enterprise type of product where a buyer and champion is different from the user who's actually using the product, right? You make a 3-year contract and you pay for the deal ahead of time. You're kind of bound to using the product.
Hmm.
But if you don't, then you will make some decisions. You will, there will be decisions made about it, right? And I have been in that situation where I've said, well, we're not using this product anymore. Do we really need this at this point?
That's right. That's
So,
right.
so
Well,
yeah,
that makes me think about, conversation we have around pricing strategy, right? You know, you have to understand who your user is and why are they using your product, whether it's B2B or B2C. And so those will also give you indicators of when you should be looking at what KPIs you should be monitoring, right? So if you have a product, for example, I'm going to think about Neural. We have a ton of products, right? But when you have a product and the customer only uses it maybe once a year, well, it's really important to understand that. It's important to understand when they're logging on. It's important to understand that at that point where they're reevaluating. And there's been pricing strategies, right? Where maybe the pricing allows it where when there's a down period, right? That's when you're re-upping or you're doing a renewal at that time because of the shift. But a lot of times when you don't know your customer behavior and we get so far from it and we're just doing the things or the activities to acquire customers, we forget exactly how we got the revenue and when we're going to get the future revenue of that business.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk about pricing strategy quickly. In the B2B space, I've been hearing a shift from sort of seat-based or uh, yearly contracts to more of a usage-based pricing strategy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I know there's a shift from the yearly to usage, and it's primarily because you've got your power users that might be using the information and you want to be able to like retain them. So if I'm not using your product that often, why am I paying a premium price? I might want access to it. I might have actually connected my data or my business is integrated in your product or service, but there are times when I'm going to need it more versus less. And so it's actually great for the business that's setting that model because they're actually having this paradigm shift where you're doing more, I'm getting more for that. You're doing less, you're not leaving me, but you're paying less. And so there's an interesting balance to see where we actually ultimately end up on. And it would be interesting to see what products decide to opt into that model, because the customer still has to believe that there's enough value that even at my lowest period and at the minimum amount, that it's worth me paying. And so that's the $1 million question that you're going to have to observe for customer behavior, right? And customers don't like change. I kind of like to know that you're going to charge me the same amount every month, unless I think I'm getting a deal. So, and consumer behavior can be the same as those, executives that are running business decisions, right? It's like, why is the bill up this month? Right? It's like your electricity. Why is it up this month? All right, what do we need to do? How do we close, turn off the lights, whatever the thing is that you need to do to be able to reduce the costs. So I see the swing, but I'd be curious to see how long we'll bite.
Yeah, fair. I mean, honestly speaking, as a value creation for users, I understand the usage-based model, but it depends upon the product. There are times when there are products that you use once a quarter, maybe once a month, but when you need that, when you need the product at that point, it's absolute must, right? So imagine you have a product that does forecasting for you or helps you forecast data, your revenue or what have you. You might use it once a quarter, but it's imperative to use it at that time. And so how you build that product might be different from a product that you use on a monthly or maybe even a daily basis.
Absolutely. I would even say that if you're going to build a product that a customer uses very frequently, it has to feel seamless, right? I've got to make a seamless integration and make it so easy and embed it that there's no opportunity for me to have to rethink, how do I use this product again? I can easily see data from before. I can easily get in and I can easily get out. You want to make it pretty sticky, right? You want to make all of the features and the bells and whistles really, really enticing so that for that person who only has to use it a little bit, that they can use it. And of course, it'd be great, right, if it's really hard to like pull all of that out. So when you're creating that high value product, you're not bringing in feature sets that are something that you're like drooling over and makes my life super, super easy. It becomes like, well, a commodity, and you don't want your product to be a commodity. You want them to feel like this is super easy. I can get in and get out. Think about taxes. Same thing, right? Whatever the tax model that most people use. I don't want to do my learning curve over. Just let me get in, make it easy, make me upload, make me download, tell me information when I need it, and then I'm out, right? That to me is a great value creation that you can do.
Yeah, we can talk about TurboTax all day.
Do we have to? But yes.
Oh my God. It's come a long way, but I still find it hard to use. Man, there are times when I just go like, okay, I can't deal with this anymore.
Right.
But I know it's a very complex problem that they're trying to solve, and we've come a long way from the time when we had to actually do paperwork.
For sure. Well, that's why there's so many great startups out there in that space trying to solve this one begrudging task that most people don't want to do, right? And so there's a lot of great startups out there that are in the ecosystem that are trying to figure out a way to make it as painless, because you got to do it in either way. And so I think it's a great model for those that are building value-based products as well is looking at some of the learnings from those orgs of how did you get customers to like have to do something and make it super simple, right? I got kids. I think about the dentist, right? Like I think about like the pediatric dentist, the person that makes it super. You gotta get a cleanup. It's gotta happen. But how do you make it super simple where kids are not fearful of it, right? Whatever is the screens or the toys or the coins or the stickers or the balloons, whatever the thing is that you need to make that experience feel very different than when you become an adult and it's a clinical, it's an in and out process, right? So.
Oh, I still am scared of dentists. I go in there and I'm like, when can I get out of here?
Exactly.
Um, let's talk about sort of a situation where you actually have seen a decline in revenue. Like, so we talked about leading indicators. Let's talk about that and like give us an example of what happened and how did you guys get out of the situation?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you can't be running in go to market or running revenue or running revenue ops and not see a decline. You got to sit in the seat. If you're in the seat for more than 2 to 3 years, you're going to see a decline. And I'm just thinking about I'm trying to think about an interesting situation where, um, one organization that was at, we were seeing this decline and we couldn't understand why this decline was of revenue. And we had the KPIs, we had the dashboard, but the part that was missing, which we started to include, was we didn't have was the story and the insights. So the people that are closest to the actual deal creation, the people that are actually running the marketing ads, the people that are actually talking to the customers and the deals, we didn't have the storyline of what are the things that they were saying. And so what we learned was that there was interesting competitors that were coming in the space that were essentially offering better pricing. We believed our product was much more superior, but the pricing was the pricing. And what it told us, well, let me just say what we did. So one of the things we did was we were like, all right, let's deep dive and understand like what are this competitor. And there was one particular, what are they doing? What are they offering? We kind of knew who they were. We saw them before. We didn't think they were anything, but they made some major shifts that mimicked some of the things that we did.
Oh.
Now, that was like super helpful to know because sometimes we take snapshots of our competitors or the industry and we use that information forever. But we got to be consistent about going back and always kind of taking a snapshot to see where we are. Once we realized one of the things, we went right back to the team and said, all right, they're actually saying the exact thing that we learned, which is that these competitors are coming in. What do they think are the solutions and what are they seeing? And what they clearly saw was customers were using this product, but then 3 to 4 and 5 months, they were actually not happy with the product. It didn't live up to what it needed to be. So they were getting clients that were coming back. So then that took us to take an opportunity to step back and say, listen, we may be able to clear off some of the bleeding, but what can we offer clients to re-entice them to come back to us as a user? And that was really critical. We had a little war room. I remember it was us, it was the revenue side, the marketing side, and the product side. And we got down together and we're like, all right, how do we attract these clients who left us, who may have already left to go and then think about our offering to come back? And we did. And then we did 2 other things. We created an offering, and then we started to really focus on the things that we did well. We talked about our customer testimonials. We made sure to talk about why we were in this long game. We went back to the basics. We tell our story of why we're doing the business and who our clients were, and our deep commitment of understanding our user. And that really, 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 really helped us create that hockey stick back of growth that we needed to get. But some of this is making sure that not only when you're looking in this data, that you're seeing the trend line and you can have some insights. But as an executive and as a leader, there's great value in having consistent conversations with your people or skip levels or conversations with others or town halls where people are not just focusing on their career. Yes, that is an important part, but they're also just talking about what are they seeing or hearing. And when you take that information with your data, you'll be able as a leader to have a different narrative, and when you're in an early startup, you're really, really close to your clients. But when your company gets really big and scale, I've been in company, truly scaled, IPO, went to Zillow, huge, NerdWallet, smaller, scaled, right? Open Door, huge. When you're scaling so fast, your world of responsibility grows, and that's amazing. But the inside is a great leader is that you've got to build in these systems where you're jumping back and seeing and touching the people that touch stuff that you used to see at a more intimate level. And that was really something that I took as a leader, which is that I would make sure that every month, I would always do a really great job of like, how are people feeling of the culture? How do you feel about the organization? What are things we can do? Because I believe people and revenue are hugely tied, if you don't know that. I think it's like your team and your revenue, I don't know why they did that. It's an exciting moment.
I guess so.
And it's a winner. You got to do that. But when you make sure that you're having conversations to people about, tell me what you're hearing from our clients. Tell me what your instincts are. Sometimes you get these nuggets of insight that you just can't find on a dashboard. And it explains some of the things on the dashboard. Makes me reflect about a conference that happened that someone went to in a team. And she came back and she's like, there's this new, question that people are trying to solve for. And I don't know how our product relates to it, but I know that this was a topic that came up. And so it was a perfect opportunity for me to say, why don't we just get our marketing team to write a blog around this topic as a thought leader in the organization? And we did that. So again, listening to different insights and learnings from people on your team can inspire you to do a different thing that might enable your business to focus on retention and revenue and keep it growing.
Love that. Love that. People and revenue are tied is a great insight. It's such
Yes.
an important insight. Um, and I believe in this mantra of keeping your ear to the ground. Uh,
Mm.
let's talk about that a little bit. So I've heard from a lot of sort of executives that they do interesting things to make sure they connect with folks at various levels, right? It's one thing to be talking to your direct team that reports into you, but there's, as a team grows, as you said, there are multiple different cross-functional team members as well as multiple layers within your own organization. Can you tell us about some tactics that you put in place when you go to a company as you scale to make sure you're paying attention to the details?
Sure. I think everyone usually speaks to their direct leaders, right? Because they're your eyes and ears. They're going to give you insight and they have expertise in a way that you can't see it. Many people subscribe to skip level. I do too. Skip levels are great. Another great way to get insight on your teams. There's definitely town halls. That's another way that people will do to bringing in. Done town halls, we've done lunches, we've done dinners, we've done happy hours where you bring select group of folks that come in and have access to leaders and people and to kind of share or problem solve. Another thing, though, that I started to do, which I found to be really important, particularly when you are a leader of a ton of people, is that you have to remember that your organization still works cross-functionally with other people. And they may see insights that impact your org even more. And so I would actually look to, make connections, particularly like I love my engineering team, my product team, my finance team, right? Like when is the next birthday or when is the next happy hour, and try to get an invite there and work with a leader to come in. And really it's about building those connections and relationships with the people that you work with, but it also helps you get a different perspective that again you won't normally get. It's sitting down with someone in engineering who you may or may not always talk to, and you get an opportunity to just grab a quick appetizer with them, and you're in an event that they're there and you go as a leader, you hear about some of the things that they kind of maybe want to ideate and dream about, right? It's like, or you can share a problem that you have and they're like, oh my God, that sounds like a great hackathon thing that I would love to do. And you're like, really? And that's super exciting. I remember many times where I'm like, ooh, if you want to go to, you want to get some support on a hackathon in an org, go hang out with the other team members and like, essentially put some ideas in their head and maybe they'll like think about it, right? So much of when people go to work, it's all about just what they do, but it doesn't mean that they don't have opinions or ideas or suggestions for other parts of the work. And so I think it's just a really important thing as a leader to make sure you make those decisions strategically, consistently to go out and get the information.
Yeah, just to add to that, Amirah, I've met a couple of entrepreneurs who started to create like these weekly weekly wins and weekly learnings and weekly fails. Especially in a startup environment, I've seen weekly wins and I've seen weekly learnings, but the weekly fails was very interesting to me. And they celebrate all of those failures as a thing to do. And I was just like blown away. Yes, when you're in an early stage startup, you will have a lot of failures. And
Yeah.
celebrating that was an interesting way to sort of accept the reality and actually embrace it.
Yeah, I will speak to like when I was in Neurola, we did an amazing thing, which I love. We talked about failures and we embraced them because it was an indicator that you tried something, even though it didn't work, and you learned something. I have to give it up. I've had the privilege of working with amazing CEOs, and Tim was really great at that. It's like, what did we learn from this thing that just happened? How can we take this? Oh, by the way, someone else made a mistake on this. You might be trying to do that. What would you do differently? That's a different way. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. Sometimes you work with organ people or on teams and like, we tried that already. It's my favorite. We tried that already. Okay, well, was it about timing? Was it are you going to execute it the exact same way? And I felt like when we were there, particularly at Neural, we would see a fail and it's like, maybe I would try to solve that problem, but maybe I would change these 2, 3 things. And I attribute it's like, my daughter, the great chocolate chip cookie recipe debate, right? There are hundreds of chocolate chip cookie recipes, and you can eat a cookie the exact same ingredients, but they all taste different. And they only taste different because there are different measurements, there might be different products. And so it doesn't mean that you can't build a great cookie in an organization or solve a great problem, but it can mean that maybe the ingredients or the mechanics or the way you did it was absolutely different than the other way the other person did it. And embracing that in an organization is really healthy because it allows individuals to feel as if, particularly I think when you're newer coming in an organization, you're starting off in your career and you have like great insights or ideas. As a leader, it's important to support that. And they may see this same problem, but just attack it differently. And guess what? They might win. They might win.
Yeah, there's no straight path in this whole like disruptive space that we live in, and having that growth mindset is so important for every organization, not just product but sales and go to market leadership as well. um, I want to switch and ask you a question about so you've been a GTM leader for a while and you've seen revenue and all kinds of revenue. Let's talk about the quality of revenue. Is all revenue the same?
No. um, I think that I've been in places where it was revenue at all costs. I won't say places. I'll say in moments in time,
I've
right?
seen it.
Right? Different leaders with different visions of how they want to get there. And sometimes when we get revenue, there's a lot of work to get it, and then we don't focus on how to keep it. And so when you're getting revenue for revenue's sake and you're not worried about retention, you're not worried about churn, you're not worried about product experience, then essentially in my opinion, you're burning out your clients, you're also burning out your team. And so revenue at all costs, I think, is not a sustainable practice. I do think that when you are being thoughtful and strategic, but aggressive, it's a great play when you think about building revenue. You want to be smart. You want to make sure that you're bringing the best. Um, you know, Even when I personally was thinking about where I wanted to work, I was like, I got to believe that this company's poised to win, right? Like, what is our competitive edge? Because that alone will tell you and help you when you're driving revenue what you can and cannot do. And so, it's a career tip. It's like, you can take any job. You can get revenue however many, in many companies. Every company that has a door wants revenue. So you can pick and choose where to work, right? The question is, will they do it strategically? Will they do it smart? And do they value the way they get revenue? That's important.
Yeah, retention is such a important metric. I'm a growth leader, and we look at retention like, our life depended upon it. And we look at retention from a product usage perspective. Revenue is something we look at obviously revenue is important, but we look at it like our life depends upon it. Um, and the way I think about it is, a lot of times, especially newer folks to product, think that CAC is a way to look at user acquisition, and retention is something that you need to worry about later on. And like, let's just make sure acquisition is doing well and things like that. I go like, well, if you don't worry about retention from the get go, you're just creating a leaky bucket.
That's right.
And you're going to burn out your target user base at some point. And it's far worse than, having fewer customers is better that are highly retained, than having more customers who come to you but then leave you right away.
I think of retention for your clients is important, retention of your product and your people. If you are not thinking about that on a, it's hard for me to just think about revenue, because, I think about revenue and then I think about the company, because there's again, people and revenue are so aligned, right? Without that focus, you can lose sight. And that is another KPI that you want to be mindful of, right? Our customers, how many customers are we losing every month? Why are we losing them every month, right? That's product feedback, that's sales feedback, that's service feedback, that's feedback for everyone to understand. It requires so much effort to acquire a customer. You do not want to lose them. Same thing for your great talented people. When you've got an amazing person, a business development person on your team or a salesperson on your team, you don't want to lose them, because they're probably driving a ton of your actual revenue growth or sales goals that you need. So you need to understand when you have a retention issue, why, like what is happening, and you need to get in there to diagnose the problem, to understand what the causes are so you can actually solve them.
Yeah, I would even say retention is a leading indicator of revenue. Product retention, especially, is a leading indicator of revenue, because the way I look at it is like, if users are not using your product, not getting value out of the product, then long behold, it will impact your retention over time. And especially for self-serve, right? Products where it's a monthly subscription product and you can leave them anytime you want. For instance, StreamYard is one of those products. I'm paying them on a monthly basis to help me host these podcasts, and as long as it's serving that need of mine, I will continue to pay them. And the day it doesn't work well for me, then I'm gone, right?
That's right.
It keeps you on your toes. But yeah, like even products, they're enterprise products where there's a lot of initial work to convert a user. It becomes even more important, in terms of keeping them retained, and from a perspective of actually adding value to them, not just sort of building relationships with them. But you bring up a good point of retention amongst people.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit. What open your mind a little bit and share sort of what, why you're so positive about that. I believe you're right, because I like to keep my team intact as much as possible. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I had this big epiphany. Not that I didn't know it, but maybe it's like I'm doing like a big campaign around this, which is understanding that every company I've met, every founder, entrepreneur, CEO, business leader is all in it to win and, drive great revenue and growth. And yet I think the thing that unlocks it the biggest is your team, and it's the people. So many individuals may not be leaders in organizations, and they may not be CEOs, but they get up every day, they do their work, they most likely have opinions on how things should be done, whether it's efficiency, whether it's growth. And without an outlet or an opportunity to be heard, then they lose the sense of feeling valued. And when people don't feel valued, they don't want to show up. Your kid in high school or middle school or elementary school, and you get invited to the classroom and no one talks to you or no one cares what book you have. Well, you don't feel valued. You want to go someplace else. That feeling does not change in an organization. And so there's no secret. We all know that people don't usually leave companies for the job. It's because of the manager or the people or the culture. But there's something that happens there. They have an opportunity to voice and feel valued because they can share their portion of understanding, their portion of how they see things. And that retention is huge because many times as a leader, you feel like you're wearing the weight of your world of like all the problems, right? You're like, oh, I got to figure out, how to make the quarter in. I got to figure out my investors. I got to figure out, this, and this. And yet, as a strategic advisor, what I love is when I meet with the leaders and then when I meet with 2 layers down, usually. And it's interesting to see how usually within those few layers below, they care as much of the organization more than you would ever imagine. They actually feel like, we need to have a better values or we need to like realign on our missions. And I'm like, that's amazing that these individuals care about your business more than you even see or realize. So I think it's a huge opportunity for leaders to take advantage of, and that's not the right word, not take advantage, to really lean in and understand the importance of it, to recognize that when you have great people that you've selected to be a part of the journey with you, you need to make sure they feel valued. You need to make sure that you're listening to them and know and make them inclusive in the journey. I'll share one story, and I feel like I have a
I'd
question,
love it.
but
I'd love it.
when I made the swap from corporate to tech, one of the biggest things that I felt was this feeling of we're in this mission together. I was in this big company at Citibank. I learned a ton. I don't talk bad about any of my companies because I feel like, I learned so much. I was just excited to be there. And in a big organization that's been around for over 100 years, there's a lot of luxuries that you have, like data, right? Like data, like training. You got things that you're like, oh, every company has that. And you're like, oh, every company does have a training team or like an HR team, right? Then you go to tech. And then you realize that the reason why someone is willing to get paid less than they maybe could at a bigger company is because they believe that they're actually going to help this leader win in this category. I believed that Trulia was the most amazing thing in the world. I proudly wore my backpack. I proudly, like we're going to make sure that it was transparent and clear. I wanted my neighbors to talk about us, right? That excitement that you get from employees, I don't think most leaders even understand a drop of what that means, right? People leave their homes and family, their partners, their children for weeks at a time to go help you solve this thing, to hit these metrics, not just because they're paid, right? Not just because of stock options, because they truly believe. And so to go back to the point of like retention of your people, I would say like if I was my campaign or championship and like my next part of my career is like I want to really help leaders understand you want revenue, you want an IPO, you want growth, think about your people. What is the process around the people? I'm not talking about pastries, I'm not talking about coffee, I'm not talking about gifts. I'm talking about figuring out what the true value is of the people that you have with there. That is the biggest gift that when you see a great leader that understands that, it's magic. You can do magic with your organization.
No, absolutely true. And I've also made that transition from large companies, East Coast based companies, financial services companies to tech. And I came via being an entrepreneur. So I had already sort of changed my perspective of how to think about what my work is. But it's amazing to see the culture here in the tech industry where opinions from any level can be heard. Obviously, various companies are, the culture does change from company to company and team to team. But in general, that thread is something that I've seen across the board. Like for instance, I worked at Spin Scooters, and I was the payments head of payments there. And even today, when I see a Spin Scooter in San Francisco and I'm walking around, I'm super excited. Oh, the brand still is around. The product is still around. hey, I used to work here. It gets exciting, right? Like I cared about the business a lot.
Right.
And yeah, I completely understand that feeling of ownership is something you should embrace and try to make sure you drive it by listening to people and being there for them.
Yes, yes, and yes. When a person feels like their voice and insights matter, they will take the baton and run it for you, right? And so there's many times where I think as leaders, they don't realize the impact. They're like, "Oh, it's my company," or it's my
Our
company. They'll
company.
never, da 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 da. And it's like, it is your company. But do you not understand that this person, outside of their job description, is willing to write this competency framework because you don't have an HR team, you have a recruiting team because they took a class and they're super excited and they see the value, right? Like there are things that um, you have to be willing as a leader to be acutely aware of the importance of it. Because here's the reality: if 50% of the people left, you don't have a business. You don't have business, and you definitely don't have revenue. And so I want to help people understand that it is about metrics. It is about understanding and having a dashboard to tell you which way to drive. It's your navigation system, right? It's your ways. It tells you what to look out for, what might be happening, what's typical at this time for Google traffic, right? Like it's all those things with your dashboards when you're looking at revenue. But what makes those products really good is not just the technology, but it's the people that are actually inputting the information to give you a heads up, right? Like there's a cop in a mile, right? Like that's user feedback that gives it to you. Same thing in a company, same way if you want to grow revenue, same if you scale, particularly if you want to IPO. Can't IPO without listening to your people and giving them the space to be scrappy, to grow. And thankful that I've had the ability to do that, and great leaders that were like, yeah, we want to do this. And so it's just imperative for great organizations to do it.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit, and um, so think. Let's talk about the time when revenue starts to grow, like
Mm,
hockey stick growth.
yes. Yes.
How give us a scenario and give us some advice on that.
Yeah. So I'm going to boil it down to three things when I think about hockey stick growth. First of all, so what, right? Like, holy, so what? Okay, this just happened. Let's take an insight on like what is happening. Let's celebrate it. Now what do we do, right? Because at some point it's going to plateau. So like, and then the next part is like, what just happened? What did we do so that we can then implore or potentially use that same strategy to do it again? Many times in sales, we get so excited about closing the deal or closing the number for the month that we don't really do a great job of taking a quick look back to say, what were those initiatives that we've done? We're always creating a new initiative. So it's important when you're getting that growth that you're like, yay, excitement. What did we just do? Capture that information. And then how do you codify what you just did? Hockey sticks don't happen all the time. There might be something that you did or changed, and you might have done a lot of strategies. Okay. Sorry, startups, we do a lot of strategies, right? We're like, let's try these 5 things. Okay, you tried these 5 things. And between marketing and sales, you're like, what do we do? I don't know. Right? So you need a dashboard to figure out what did you do and what worked so that you can take not those 10 strategies, but what were the 3 strategies or the 4 out of the 2 teams to see what did we do to impact that number. But the hockey stick is the most beautiful graph, right? Like, that's a celebration graph because you know that you've done something amazing at that moment. But don't rest on your laurels too quickly, because at some point it's going to plateau. You should be able to think about when is it going to plateau, but you will only know that if you know what caused that drive of revenue.
Interesting. And sometimes it's not what you did. Sometimes it's the industry.
Sometimes it's industry, sometimes it's the news, right? That's happening on a more broader scale. Sometimes pandemic, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
There was a lot of false thoughts around, the real estate space, home space, of what that meant and what that would be long term. A lot of those predictions were right for the first 2 years, but they fell off the minute you allow people to now like get out of their houses. They didn't care about the houses as much, right? But that was like with a lot of consumer behavior. What do people watch? What do people eat? What do people drink? that was all impacted by the pandemic. Recognize what that was. I will say, if you did notice, right, that there was a moment in time where people needed your product, let's say I'm thinking about the pandemic, and they were all of a sudden using your product for a very unique reason,
Yeah.
then the question is really understanding what happened and where potentially there might be other moments in a user journey where they might have those experiences again, right? So, client that I advise, okay, we went through this, they had this boom, but it's really clear though in Q4, consumer behavior changes because they're just not as work focused. They're looking for more social interactions, right? So what can you do to promote and drive revenue growth during this cyclical time where people are more having downtime, right? What other points of time? Summertime, right? So it actually gives us a different lens to look back at the revenue and say, oh, okay, I'll never get maybe this level of growth, but I might be able to get more than baseline if I can find interesting moments within my user journey where they're slightly like this that I can do and be more strategic about my marketing and my product experience during that time.
Gotcha. No, amazing insight. Um, Amira, let's talk a little bit about just sort of uh, any advice you have for folks who are just starting out as a go-to-market
Mm.
leader. What should they be thinking about? And like, if you were to go back and give yourself a younger self advice, what advice would you give them?
Ooh. I would definitely surround myself. I think I try to get a bunch of leaders around me, but I would be really, really like specific, around like other go-to-market leaders, potentially that might be in similar or different spaces because you can get different ideas from them that you might be able to test in your space. I think early in your career, you're always looking for someone who's a mentor, and they may or may not be in the same industry or your in your niche work that you do. I would definitely say try to find people, follow their information that are in your space because they're going to be lessons and learnings that you're going to hear and see that were going to be really important. You're also going to get great insights on what's happening in your piece. So, for example, in go to market, right? When you're seeing in it, like one organization, right, where I was actually talking to a colleague that worked in another company, and I learned about, potential reorganizations that were happening. Now, we knew we could never compete with this organization, but what we did know were there were some great talented people that we could actually bring on board and bring as leaders. And that was a great pipeline for my business. And I'm very lucky that we were able to have that. So when you're in the space, try to find yourself in groups with mentors or thought leaders that are in your space so they can tell you more or insights of what's happening to keep you abreast. So that would be one. And then the second thing I just say, pay attention to the industry, particularly in go to market. Pay attention to the industry. Competitors tell you so much. There's always someone that you're always chasing. I feel like you want to be better than this person. But guess what? There's always someone that wants to be just and beat you out. And so pay attention to the teams or organizations that you might be looking to model or look at their growth or their strategy. But those that are actually looking at you, because they can actually teach you a thing or two about where they see the focus or the growth going, and that'll give you intel as well.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for all the advice, Amira.
Absolutely.
Rose, do we have any questions from the audience?
No, not at this moment. No.
Do you have any questions, Rose, before we close out?
Actually, no. I've been writing notes and like I just trying to digest everything. It's a lot of information and it's amazing information and advice, but not at this moment.
Thanks, Rose.
Thank you.
Amira, it was wonderful talking to you, and like really like diving deep into your experience as a go-to-market leader, learning. I've learned a few things about just how to think about revenue and how to think about metrics and how to think about people, and not just users but also internal employees and various cross-functional team members. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'd love to I hope people will reach out to you with questions. And since we don't have any more questions, I would like to end our conversation here. But thank you all for spending the
Thank
time.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Rana, for this opportunity to share on your platform, and you're touching so many people and giving great information. So thank you for doing this work and continuing on to do it. And thank you for having me on the journey.
Thank you so much. I'm going to end
Thank you
the
for
stream
joining
now.
us.